I'm not sure if you guys are like this or not, but our family goes through kind of stretches of rotating interests. Maybe for a few weeks or so, we'll just kind of get on a family movie kick for a while, where we'll pick a different kind of animated kids movie a couple times a week and pop some popcorn and all watch together. But then other times it'll be a particular board game or a particular card game that it just seems like we get on a run of kind of playing that one over and over. Maybe we'll start a TV show and that's always what we pick to watch until we kind of finish that one. Or if Elizabeth and I are both in the middle of good books at the time, we'll just have a stretch of putting the boys to bed and staying up to read at night. But one form of entertainment that always kind of pops back up into the rotation at some point or another is watching documentaries. Are any of you guys documentary fans? I get a show of hands. Okay. There's some believers out there. Obviously, like every summer when Shark Week rolls around, that should be declared an international holiday so that everybody can just get together and watch shark documentaries. But even at other times, documentaries are just great, right? I love sports documentaries. Elizabeth loves crime documentaries. Sometimes we'll hit the jackpot and find a sports crime documentary. But there are three categories that I know are just off limits. With movies, it's westerns and mafia movies. Like, she'll just be right out, not interested. But with documentaries, there's three subject matters that I know are just non-starters. Mount Everest, deep space, and the open ocean. Also plane crashes, if we're close to like flying ourselves, then plane crashes get added to the list. But at all times, she just can't handle Everest, deep space, and the open ocean. And as much as those might seem like three kind of totally unrelated things, the rationale is actually exactly the same for each. There's one thing that she just finds like bone-chillingly terrifying, and it's the abyss, right? Whether it's climbing unbelievably high mountains with unbelievably deep chasms that you can't see into the bottom of, or kind of bobbing in the sea with underneath of you untold miles and miles of shrouded secrets, or whether it's kind of floating on the verge of the infinite blackness of space. The reality in each of those is the same. In each of those, man comes kind of face to face with the abyss, right? The depths. And there are few things that are more haunting than the depths, than the deep places of the world. Few places that we feel our futility and our helplessness more than in the depths. And that is exactly where the psalmist finds himself here in Psalm 130. Out of the depths, he cries. He cries out. This isn't the first time in the Psalms that the poet has chosen the imagery of kind of the murkiness of watery depths in order to communicate his place of trial and his despair. In Psalm 69, David kind of employed the same picture, saying, "Save me, God, the water has risen to my neck. I've come into deep water and the flood sweeps over me." And it's not even just the Psalms that use this imagery either. A lot of you probably remember our recent series through the book of Jonah. It was into the depths that Jonah chose to hurl himself into an attempt to escape God's assignment. And then it was from those watery depths that the Lord heard when he cried out for rescue. And like Jonah, like many who have kind of ventured into the deep places of the world beyond human aid and realized their need for the Creator's intervention, the psalmist calls out to the Lord. Out of the depths I call to you, Lord. Lord, listen to my voice. Let your ears be attentive to my cry for help. This is kind of the strange mercy of the depths, that they teach us to cry out. And I say strange because it's not like God is any more likely to hear us from the depths than he is anywhere else. It's not like his ears are especially tuned to distress signals and he only picks up when circumstances are at their most dire. One thing that I really enjoy doing for fun is going to Activate over in Dartmouth Crossing, right? If you haven't been there, it's just got kind of like rooms full of different obstacles and challenges and active like games and puzzles to solve. It's like playing a video game, but instead of playing one, you're like inside of one. And it always, I don't know, makes me feel like I'm in the danger room from the old X-Men cartoon. If you haven't been there, Corey and I are looking for people to go with, so hit us up. But one of my favorite rooms in there has a whole wall of screens, and each screen has an asteroid that's getting larger and larger coming towards you. And kind of as a team, you have to like throw rubber balls and hit them and destroy them as they get closer. And as you go like higher and higher up the levels, you might see a small asteroid on the screen right in front of you, but you don't have time to try to hit it right now because in 3 other places, there's big ones that have flashing red warning lights that are getting dangerously close and about to kind of end your lives. And so you just have to like momentarily ignore the little ones and hit the ones that pose a more imminent threat. That is not how God operates. He doesn't have like a limited amount of time and attention, and his ears can only pick up on so much. He doesn't put you on hold until the problem gets worse. He's not a triage nurse who's determining which situations he needs to get involved in now and which ones can stand to wait a little bit. Peter says that his eyes are on us and his ears are open to our prayers. John says that we have confidence that whatever we ask, he hears us. Isaiah records this when he's writing about the Lord speaking about his new creation people. He says, even before they call, I will answer. While they are still speaking, I will hear. The hidden mercy of the depths is not that they attune God's ears to us. It's that they have a way of turning our hearts to him, right? Bringing us kind of to the end of our rope and showing us our need. We need him just as much when the sailing is smooth. It's just easier not to notice. One commentator writes, what is clear in all such passages is that self-help is no answer to the depths of distress, however useful it may seem in the shallows of self-pity. Have you ever been there? Like in the depths where the psalmist finds himself here? I actually hope that you answer yes to that. Not because I enjoy the thought of you nearly drowning, but because the truth is that whether we know it or not, whether we like it or not, all of us have been there. And I hope that the Lord has allowed you at one point or another to recognize that. If you're unsure what I mean by that, just look at how the psalmist kind of further clarifies his situation. Pick up in verse 3. Lord, if you kept an account of iniquities, Lord, who could stand? We've read Psalms of distress before. This is actually the 6th in a series of 7 penitential psalms that are spread across the book, which are psalms whose kind of first half is filled with trouble and alarm, but that ultimately kind of burst out in confident faith by the time the psalm's over. But this time, the cause of distress isn't illness. It's not homesickness. It's not even persecution, like we've seen in previous of these psalms. The psalmist is drowning in iniquity, in sin, in wrongdoing. The problem is sin. From the depths I cry to you. What depths? Psalmist says, let's just say if the Lord kept a record of all my sins, I would be in deep over my head. As terrifying as it might be to find yourself kind of trapped in a cold mountain crevasse. As terrifying as it might be to be stranded in the airless void of space. As terrifying as it might be to to lose touch with the surface when your scuba tank is running low and the darkness of the submarine world is closing in. As terrifying as each of those might be, none of them compare to the gaping abyss that is our sin. An abyss that all of us were born into, and an abyss into all of which all of us kind of willingly plunged ourselves deeper. I think it is really worth stopping here for a moment. This is where this psalm begins, kind of feeling the depths. I think it's worth stopping for a minute to just be painfully honest with ourselves, to be really blunt about how often this is true for us. That the depths that we find ourselves in, the trials and the opposition and the suffering and the just overwhelmingness of life, how often those are products of our sin. We don't like to think about that. We're really proficient at chalking our distress and our trials and our pain and our suffering up to other things. Like, I am really good at saying things like, sorry, I'm just tired, right? That rolls off the tongue a lot more easily than, sorry, I'm just desperately wicked, right? Now, I'm not going to stand here and tell you that every time that you feel beat down, that every time you feel tired or worn out or unwell or anxious or hurt or frustrated, that every time that it's a compounding result of unwise choices and unconfessed sin patterns and self-absorbed laziness and kind of laxity around your personal holiness. But I will tell you this, that is true more often than you would like to admit. I'm not going to tell you that it's always the reason, but I am certainly going to tell you that it is often the reason. I think we like to, in our minds, kind of reduce it down to only a fraction of the time. And friends, that's just not true. Guys, sin is life-sucking. It kills. It deteriorates. If you can't figure out kind of why everything seems to be going downhill and why you feel terrible and why it just always seems like you're drowning, why life just seems to be like one mess after another, like, go see a doctor. Yes. Have tests run to see what's wrong. Buy a planner. Work to get organized. Set up a budget. By all means, try all of those things and explore all of those avenues to see what's going wrong. But don't neglect the most essential step, taking a long, hard look in the mirror at your own personal holiness. Put your heart under the microscope and root out the unfaithfulness that's hiding there. If you don't know how to do that, find a brother or sister that cares enough to be honest with you and help you. Again, I'm not saying that every difficulty and trouble in our lives is the product of sin, but I think we know that. I think we've been taught that often. I think we've been comforted with that thoroughly, that not all suffering comes from sin. But I think we've forgotten that a lot of it is. If the psalmist's friend heard him call to the Lord from the depths and said to him, hey, chin up, pal, just because you're suffering, it doesn't mean it's your fault. It doesn't mean it has anything to do with sin. The psalmist would say, look, if the Lord kept an account of my iniquities, I wouldn't be able to stand. The only thing that's deeper than the water drowning me right now is the list of sins that got me into this mess. And if we stop and think about that, isn't that true for all of us? Corey asked us to consider this as we were singing, but if there was a list of all your iniquities, kind of a list of everything that would condemn you, how would you hold up to that? Maybe you're here today and you aren't a follower of Jesus and you've never really thought a whole bunch about kind of this idea of sin. We don't blame you. It's who would want to. It's not really a pleasant thing to talk about. But humor me and think for just a moment. If you stood up in front of all your family and all your friends and all your coworkers and all the people that you most respect, and with everyone kind of gathered around, someone read off a list of all the things that you've done. not even all the things that you've done, but all the things that you've said and all the thoughts that you've had, like even the deepest, darkest, most secret ones. Could you bear that? Could you like stay standing long enough even for them to get done reading the list? Could you face people afterwards? I think the answer is no. The psalmist anticipates kind of a rhetorical no to this question, and the answer should be no. You aren't meant to be able to stand all of that. And that's the point. Our sin is crushing. It overwhelms, it crushes, and it kills. But notice that as quickly as the psalmist identifies the cause of his distress, he identifies the solution. Lord, if you kept an account of iniquities, Lord, who could stand? But with you there is forgiveness, so that you may be revered. The Lord who could oppressively crush you with his ledger is the Lord in whom there's found forgiveness. Friend, if you're here today and you've never really considered your sin very much, or if you're here today and you're feeling really overwhelmed by it, if you are feeling caught in the depths, you need to know that however deep your sin is, God's grace is deeper. With the Lord, there is forgiveness. Later in the psalm, the writer adds that faithful love is with the Lord, that with him is redemption in abundance. And you need to hear this. You have to get this. If you're here visiting today and you have not given your whole self to the lordship of Jesus, you need to understand how this is possible and how this happens. And if you're here today and you're a Christian, but you haven't really, frankly, if you're honest, lately been wanting to put your life under a microscope because you're afraid you kind of know what you would find there, coming to grips with your sin right now that you've been tolerating just feels like more than you can handle at this moment with everything that's on your plate, you also need to be reminded about this. How it is that there can be forgiveness and faithful love and redemption in abundance that's in the same Lord. Because here's the thing. Your sin is a crushing load. There is no two ways about that. There's no other way that you could slice it. Your sin has to, inherently must crush and kill. But the good news of the gospel is that it doesn't have to crush and kill you. Why? Because Jesus took your place. Why do we have this cross over here? Because it reminds us where Jesus was crushed and killed in our place by our sin. Why do we gather around the table like we're going to do later in this service and eat the bread and drink the cup together? Because it reminds us that our sin is a crushing load and Jesus was crushed and killed in our place. You can cry out to the Lord from the depths and he will hear you. Why? Because Christ was killed and was buried and descended into the deep. He went into the depths, into the heart of the earth in your place. You can rest assured that the Lord, his ears will be attentive to your cry for help. Why? Because the Father turned away from the Son. And when the Son cried out, my God, he was forsaken. His voice fell on deaf ears from the cross so that yours would fall on attentive ones. The Father turned his back on the Son so that he could turn his face to shine on you. He stood beneath the weight of your iniquities and he was crushed so that your shoulders could be unburdened and so that your lungs could breathe free. That is why this forgiveness that the psalmist talks about is a sure deal. Why the redemption comes in abundance. Why the faithful love is not in doubt. It's why the psalmist is filled with joy like David is in Psalm 32. Because transgression is forgiven. Not might be, but is forgiven. Sin is covered. Redemption is in abundance. For us, having the privilege of being God's people on this side of the cross gives us even more confidence to know how true that is. Look at the psalmist's response in verse 5 and 6. I wait for the Lord. I wait and put my hope in his word. I wait for the Lord more than watchmen for the morning. More than watchmen for the morning. I wait on the Lord. But waiting here doesn't just mean allowing the passage of time. It's clarified by the second half of verse 5. I put my hope in his word. Waiting in the biblical sense means exactly that. It means deferring hope and trusting in the meantime. That's why this season of Advent, as we wait and anticipate, can be so instructive and beneficial to us. We can take time to remember the waiting that preceded Christ's first coming, so that we can learn how to better wait for his second coming, to defer our hope and trust in the meantime. And the psalmist tells us exactly what we find when we wait. We find assurance. How is it that he says he waits in verse 6? He waits more than watchmen for the morning. What could be a sure, is that a word? More sure? What could be a surer thing than that? I wait with the kind of assurance that the night watchman waits for the morning, kind of deferring my hope until then, knowing that the sun's inevitably going to rise. Every night watchman who has ever waited for the morning has not waited in vain. And then the psalm ends with a call to Israel to follow this response, to find the same redemption in abundance. He says, Israel, put your hope in the Lord, for there's faithful love with the Lord. With him is redemption in abundance, and he will redeem Israel from all its iniquities. King's Table Church, put your hope in the Lord, for there is faithful love with the Lord, and with him is redemption in abundance. He will redeem you from all of your iniquities. So here's my question. How do I know if I'm doing that? What does it practically look like to wait on the Lord? What does it look like to be assured of his forgiveness? I want to give you 3 applications for this passage that we just read together. But I also want you to be able to kind of use these applications as diagnostic questions, to be able to do what we talked about before and examine your own heart to see where it's at, to see if it's actually waiting on the Lord, deferring hope and trusting in the meantime. If these are things that you find yourself doing, then it's an indicator that you aren't waiting on the Lord. So here's 3 applications. First, don't continue in sin. Maybe that seems really basic. But I said a few minutes ago that no matter how deep your sin is, grace is deeper. However much you have to be forgiven of, he has more than that much forgiveness, right? Verse 4 assures us of this. But look what verse 4 says that the forgiveness is for. Forgiveness is that he might be revered. The ends to which forgiveness should lead is the fear and the honor and the respect of the Lord. Forgiveness isn't extended to be taken advantage of. It's not given to be manipulated. The psalmist doesn't say, with you there is forgiveness so that you might be exploited. If you cry out to the Lord from the depths and then you continue unrepentantly in your sin, that's exactly what you would be attempting to do, to exploit the grace of God. And make no mistake, God's not going to be manipulated. But beyond that, there is no reason to continue in it. It's cancerous. It's not helping you. It's not making your life any more enjoyable. When the psalmist realizes the depth of his sin, he doesn't persist in them. He stops and he cries out to the Lord, and he's heard. There's no reason for you to continue in sin. And if you are, if you find yourself persisting in it, that would be an indicator that you aren't waiting on the Lord, that you aren't deferring your hope to the morning, to the inevitable dawn of his good rule. Instead, you're putting your hope in whatever immediate comfort or immediate kind of desire or reaction you think is going to get you what you want now. So right off the bat, what does it look like to wait on the Lord? Well, first of all, it looks like turning from sin. One surefire way to know that you aren't waiting well is if you're continuing to add to the account of iniquities. But second, don't crumble under sin. Don't get me wrong, the weight of sin is every reason to crumble, right? The psalmist makes that abundantly clear. Who could possibly stand? But don't forget the all-important reality that the very next word out of his mouth is but. Who could possibly stand? But with you there is forgiveness. Part of waiting on the Lord is remembering that forgiveness. Trusting the Lord that with him there really is faithful love. Kind of deferring hope to the day of his abundant redemption with confidence that when you get to that day, what you are actually going to find is redemption. You need to know that if you aren't keenly aware of this, you need to know right now that there is a very real enemy of your souls that does not want to know this or believe this or remember this. He has honed his craft over millennia of practice, and his craft is to abhor the image of God and to seek to destroy it in his image bearers. I would imagine that most people in this room at least know the name Satan and have a vague notion of the fact that he's a bad guy. But what you might not know is that Satan is not technically a name. It's a word. It's a Hebrew word that we just kind of transliterated directly into English letters, and it means adversary or accuser. And that is exactly what you have, an adversary. He nor any of his image of God hating compatriots want you to find assurance that comes from the abundant redemption that's in Christ. And so they employ a twofold strategy. First, they tempt and they deceive. They make sin look appealing. They hold it out as good. Why would you defer your hope when you can have everything that you want, or at least most of what you want, or at least this right now? They deceive. They say, you know what? Who's to say that at the end of all of this waiting, you won't actually just find disappointment? Who's to say that, like, maybe right now you're still waiting because he's just holding out on you? And then you take the bait. You fear and you doubt and you reach for the fruit and you say, I mean, it looks good. It would feel good. It certainly seems like it would make things easier. And maybe he's right. After all, yeah, why shouldn't you? Yeah, this is good. And then comes strategy number 2. No sooner have you kind of taken his hand and tasted the fruit than he steps back scornfully and gasps, how could you? Like, what did you just do? You disgusting piece of garbage. You're like, you told me to. His role isn't just to deceive, but to deceive and then to promptly accuse. I've had a number of conversations with people who have either walked away from or shied away from Christianity for the reason that they just want to ease their conscience. The Spirit of God is unsettling them and provoking their conscience about the way that they're thinking, acting, living. And so to avoid that shame, they distance themselves from the cross. But in doing that, they are actually walking right into the open arms of shame and guilt's favored son, the golden boy of shame and guilt. The Lord is a kind father. He's one whose goodness makes you feel sick to your stomach when you have to stand in front of him to acknowledge what you've done. But he's also one whose kindness guarantees that though he's grieved by your sin, he's gonna pull you into a forgiving embrace. On the other hand, you have an accuser who's like the school bully who will convince you that what you've done is not that bad and you're actually fine to keep continuing. And then once you listen to him, he steps back and points you out to the teacher and the rest of the class with a malevolent sneer. It's a trick. Maybe you've fallen for his tricks before. Maybe you've found yourself in the depths. Don't stay there and be crushed. Cry out to the Lord and he will answer. But I also want you to know this, like maybe you have cried out to him for help and this has happened. Or maybe later today you will call out, and I want you to be prepared when you do for this to happen. You call out from the depths and the accuser is still going to be there right at your ear, and he's going to be whispering this time, I'm not sure he hears you. I doubt there's actually forgiveness for what you've done. Have you seen how long the list is lately? Frankly, between the two of us, I'm not sure there's anyone even up there. You probably just look like an idiot, calling out to nobody, and your prayers are bouncing off the ceiling. But for the sake of argument, let's just say there is someone up there. What makes you think he will listen to you? I wouldn't. If that sounds at all familiar to you, please hear me today. It's a lie. It's a lie and a deception. It's the adversary and the accuser of your soul telling you these things. All he wants is to crush you. But this is the good news. As proficient as he might be at this sadistic game that he likes to play, you don't have to play it. You don't have to be crushed by it. For two reasons. There's actually two reasons why you don't have to be crushed by your sin, and it's actually because of two other crushings. First, Christ was crushed in your place. The only thing Satan hates more than the image of God in you is the perfect image of God in the Son. And he wants to render Jesus' work ineffective for you by making the price that Jesus has already paid, you have to pay again. What he wants to do is kill two birds with one stone. Corey will say, I should have said feed two birds with one stone, but I'm talking about the devil, and he wants to kill birds with stones. He's not interested in feeding birds. If he can make you at the same time in one stroke make you doubt that forgiveness is found in God, then he can both spit at the atonement of Christ and also watch you suffer at the same time. But do you want to know why he's so desperate with all of this? Why he's desperate to crush you with your sin and make you forget that Christ was crushed in your place? It's because back in the beginning, the Lord made a promise that sent a chill down his serpentine little spine. That one day he would send a son to crush the accuser's head. And he has tried as he might to devour that seed before it could sprout. But on a silent night in Bethlehem, that son was born. 33 years later, on a silent night in Jerusalem, that son died on a Roman cross. And then 3 days later, on a quiet Sunday morning, he stepped out of the grave alive. But the heavens were anything but silent. Because in those moments, the victory of Christ had been accomplished. The accuser's head had been crushed. You don't have to crumble beneath the weight of your sin because the accuser is crumbling beneath the weight of his kingship. He's so desperate right now because his time is short, which means you can have great assurance because you know the same. You know that his time is short. The third application that I have for us very briefly, don't continue in sin, don't crumble under sin, and don't conceal sin. To those of you who don't yet belong to Christ, don't try to hide and conceal your sin. You're not going to find any freedom from it. You're not going to find any escape from it. It will only fester and mutate and give birth to new horrors in the dark. And Christian brother and sister, to hide and to conceal your sin is to preach a message contradictory to the gospel. If you are going to tell the world that with God there's forgiveness and redemption in abundance, you can't conceal your sin in shame as if that's the only exception to the rule. Either Christ defeats and atones for and forgives sin, or he doesn't. You can't invite others to bring their burdens before the Lord in the light while you just keep yours a private affair only to be addressed in hushed tones behind closed doors. If you're going to bear witness to the glorious gospel of Christ, being transparent about your sin is going to be a necessary component of that. And I want to conclude all of this by saying that, Gus, these 3 applications are part of the life that we are inviting you to join as we welcome you into our family in baptism. Paul reminds us that baptism is a type of death. He says, or don't you know that you who have died with Christ have died to sin? When you commit yourself to the waters of baptism, you are pledging a death to sin, not to continue in it. But baptism is also the Lord's declaration to you that at any point when the accuser whispers in your ear and invites you to doubt, you can invite him to take a hike. Your baptism is a declaration that you have indeed found forgiveness in the Lord, and that you can, in fact, look forward to his redemption with all the confidence of a night watchman waiting for the sun to come up. And this baptism is public. This isn't something to go do in private with just a few family and friends in a small affair. There's nothing to hide here. There's nothing to conceal. Hey, everyone, in case you didn't know, Gus is a sinner, and his list of iniquities is long. It's so long that he couldn't even stand underneath the weight of it. And Gus, you don't have to be shy about that, because that long list has been taken by Christ to the grave. And if you're here visiting and you don't know the assurance of the gospel in this way, maybe you even came for Gus's baptism, we want you to know that this can be true for you as well. Put your hope in the Lord. Find assurance in the redeeming love of Christ. If you want to talk more about what that looks like, we would be happy to talk with you after or get together sometime this week. But brothers and sisters, let's remember the faithful love of the Lord this week so that we might wait well. Not that we would continue in sin, not that we would conceal it or crumble beneath its weight. Because from the depths we called, from the depths he answered, and to the depths he went in our place, that we might find redemption in abundance.